So all of these awards are going to be things that Peyton tells himself while looking at himself in the mirror.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. I'm very
Um,
interested to see which one we start off with. I think we're going to go with in the order I sent you. So, um, the
the
first
position
award
group
is,
then.
we can do that. Yes. That's actually a great starting
Okay,
point.
great. So here we go. I'm throwing that graphic up. This is a that is a tight end. The tight end award.
All right. So, and I will say, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of action going on back there, so it is very tight in general, because there's not really a whole lot there.
It's
Um,
it's perfect because the graphic is clearly a person who's checking out like his pants, the back of his pants in a mirror. Don't look up guy looking at butt in mirror, by the way. That
right.
does
That
not go
that
well on
sounds
Google.
pro- that's
So
that's
this
along the lines of Chris Brazel's future nickname. Yeah.
exactly, it was a lot of Chris Bradwell actually. And just kidding, that's not true. But it is actually all literally covered up by tight ends. I wasn't that smart to do that meta intentionally of he's looking at tight ends in the mirror, but there's a lot of tight ends on screen right now. We'll just say that.
Great. All right. So this was a big talking point of this draft was, and it really it reared its head in the second round, right?
Yep.
Um, Namely with two picks in particular between the Jags taking Nate Borkircher and the Texans taking Marlon Klein, right? Ahead of a lot of other very talented tight ends that many
Yes.
people had much higher in consensus, right?
Mhm.
Um, and the thing that I gathered from this is there's a clear trend that the NFL wants to get heavier, and we've seen this over the past few seasons. But whenever these kind of trends, so to speak, happen in the draft, there does seem to be some kind of like finite to when we've kind of jumped the shark a little bit too. I don't know if I'm using that terminology properly, but like where the jig is kind of up and
Yep.
it's gone too far, so to speak. The best example I can provide is like a almost a recent history to a trendy, um how do I say it? Like a trendy team building strategy or like movement within the NFL bleeding into the draft and then really impacting like how certain players are taken much higher than consensus, right?
Hmm.
And the example that I immediately thought of that this kind of reminds me of like this kind of movement in regards to team building is when in after the Chiefs Mahomes or like that type of team building or the Rams high scoring after that Monday Night Football game, it felt like
Hmm.
everybody all of a sudden was just like, we are going to get as many of these fast wide receivers and just
Hmm.
like build on speed and do a ton of deep shots all the time and figure out how to use these guys in a lot of ways, and use motion with these guys who are faster than everybody else. And it really started in 2019 where, and I was really trying to pinpoint guys that were clearly overdrafted just
Hmm.
based on the fact of they fell in line with this trend that was going on, right? So in 2019, we have McCole Hardman, Paris
Hmm.
Campbell, and Jalen Hurd, who were all taken in the top 100 and were very much like overdrafted versus
Hmm.
where everybody had it ranked. And lo and behold, none of them really panned out. Maybe
Yep.
McCole Hardman, who's had like a long-ish career in the NFL, but
But on the
no,
Chiefs in that offense, yeah.
right, exactly. Um, Next year, 2020, Henry Ruggs, which for
Hmm.
non-football reasons was not good, but like even in the short stint, it was kind of more theoretical than it was
Hmm.
actual success based on his speed. And then in the second round, KJ Hamler, like a guy who was just
Hmm.
pure speed, but didn't really develop any outside of that, and is now in the UFL. Um, 2021, Kadarius Toney in the first round. Very similar idea. And then in the second round, you have rest in peace to him, but Rondale Moore,
Hmm.
very much like a move him around the formation, give him the ball in space, and like also just tell him to run down the field really fast. And
Hmm.
then even more to that effect, Tutu Atwell,
Hmm.
which Tutu's I guess like kind of been the best version of any of these guys.
Hmm. Hmm.
But even then, it's saying a lot because like when he was drafted, everybody was shocked how high he
Yeah.
was drafted given that whole wide receiver class at that point in time. And then in 2022, it felt like kind of the last time that this happened in the same way when Tyquan Thornton was drafted,
Hmm.
like 200 spots above where people thought he would
Hmm.
go.
Hmm.
And the point is that like the trends that cause the draft to move in a way where teams completely overdraft players above consensus. And I understand that consensus only means so much sometimes. Like we're just consensus is wrong in general a good amount of the time. But with these like trendy type of team building and specific uh, prototypes that teams try to make a thing, almost like trying to
Hmm.
make fetch a thing, um, it doesn't work out really that well. That's the most recent example. But with tight ends, we're kind of seeing it. I don't want to say we're not seeing it work out, but specifically with these heavy set tight ends that are not being utilized as your like any real pass catcher of consequence, so to speak, and having them return their value on where they're being drafted, which I would say typically is higher than people would draft them. Darnell Washington, I would say, was probably drafted appropriately value wise, and I
Yeah,
mean he's
in the third
probably
round.
been
Hmm.
the best like as far as this heavy style, just because he's an alien, he's a very
Hmm.
unique type of this tight end. But in that same draft class, and like I pick him out because 2023 was probably the first time I really noticed this was happening.
Hmm.
Um, so you have Darnell Washington, Luke Schoonmaker, and Luke Musgrave. Um, so like that whole grouping, all those guys ended up going, I believe, on day 2 or in the second
Hmm.
round, I think.
Hmm.
And
Then
um,
Tucker Craft early fourth, that one, right?
Tucker Craft, which I put him a little later only because there was less draft
Yeah.
capital used in that
Hmm.
scenario.
Yep.
Or like not as high of draft capital relative to like where people thought these guys would
Yeah.
go. Following year, Cardinals draft Tip Ryman way
Hmm.
higher than people thought as like a blocking only tight end,
Yep.
and last year even I could be wrong, but I think that last year we didn't really even have many of these guys. Looking at last
Right.
year's draft, it was a lot of these pass catching style tight ends, so it was hard to kind
Yes.
of pick a prototype that fits this because maybe there just weren't these guys in that class.
Hmm.
But then you fast forward to this year and we get Borkercher and Klein in the
Yep.
top 50 or whatever it was, close to the top 50, I
Yep.
think.
Hmm.
And way above guys like Max Clare, way
Right.
above the I'm trying to think of like who else theoretically. Unfortunately, with this kind of stuff, you get so bottled up in so many player names. I can't think of it right now off the top of my head, but Max
Stowers ended
Clare,
up being the second tight end drafted, right? But
yes, yeah.
not by much. But yeah, Claire was the big one. Claire
Yeah,
falling.
Raritan, which I understand the ACLs, but like there's a lot of better just prototypes for tight end. I think that were
Hmm.
in this class when
I'm pulling
those
up last
guys
year's
got
tight end
drafted.
also.
Yeah, and Oscar Delp, Sam Roush, like all these guys were much in general higher on consensus boards than Klein and Borkercher. And I guess my point is that even if it's a small sample size with these tight ends being drafted above consensus that fit this heavy set,
Hmm.
primarily blocking tight end role on these teams, I kind of think there's a little bit of an overreaction happening with these two teams in particular in Houston and San Fran in these specific spots in the draft,
Hmm.
where I think we're gonna look back in a couple years and be like, I understand that we want to get heavier to just kind of counteract the small, fast like defenses that have been built over the past few years to combat the the boom in passing game. But ultimately, the 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 pendulum is going to swing too far to where we're going to end up somewhere in the middle again. And I think that's probably where we end up after next year. Like I bet you this happens for one more year, and we get a couple more of these types of picks in the draft, and then in 2027, after there's enough of a sample size where, hey, it's probably not worth overdrafting these guys. We can probably just sit back and wait and actually get them closer to where they're actually valued,
Hmm.
and it doesn't completely um, hamper your ability to build a roster by spending almost top 50 pick on these guys. So
Yeah.
it was just kind of that was one of the big talking points of the draft, and I wanted to get your thoughts on if you think I'm being a little overreactionary with because of us moving into like these more often two tight end sets and just heavy power run schemes where blocking tight ends are very valuable. Like don't get me wrong,
Hmm.
but at what cost, kind of from a
Yeah.
draft standpoint?
I think a few things. I think we knew this was a deep tight end class kind of the whole time, so I don't think we'll see quite the same lift off right, in terms of a draft and how many are going on day two, just because I think it was pretty unique all the way through the draft process that we knew it was pretty deep. Um, I do think the Jags jumping the gun on Borkshire probably caused a lot of this. Because we've had these happen in drafts before. Like the safety class this year happened, where it was supposed to be a deep safety class, and everyone was like, "Ooh, there's going to be a run because they're really talented." Well, when it's a deep class, you wait longer. Running back
Right.
last year, right? Same thing. So I think these Titans actually would have gone off the board a little bit later, but because the Jags just went and did what they did, and very clearly were like, "This was the guy we wanted." Had Stowers not gone two picks before that, I wonder if the Jags would have done something different. But when Stowers goes, Sadiq's already gone, obviously. They probably have intel. Like, I mean, think about it. Gladstone coming from LA. The Rams took Max Clare 5 picks later.
Yeah.
So he might have known they're going to take a tight end. They're going to take a guy here. Because whenever you could take your fourth tight end, you do it in the second round. And so if that didn't happen, I just wonder if we would have had the run happen as early as it did. Now, in terms of schematically, what's going to happen on the field over the next couple seasons, I think the 12 personnel thing is actually going to go away sooner rather than later because of another trendy thing that's going to be taking place, and that's Eamon Wari playing in the slot. And just like everything, right? Like think about the NBA, like small ball is good, right? Fast
Sure.
and shoot threes. So make your center 6'7" and make your power forward a 6'6" lethal shooter and so on and so forth. And then it's like, but what if those guys could do all the same things, but they were all big?
Right.
So it's like now we play like small ball, but we're back to a 7 footer and a 6'9" guy as our big men doing that.
Right.
So it's like, okay, we're gonna play in 11 personnel, but what if instead of a 5'10", buck 90 pound corner in the slot, our slot is 6'3", 220 pounds.
Right.
So like I'm really interested. I'll talk about a player later, but there's a lot of unique body types in this draft class actually that I'm interested to see. Okay, are we gonna replicate this more? Now we didn't see people in this draft overshoot too much to try and make that happen. But I just wonder mathematically, like, are the Ravens going to be a little more motivated to keep Marlon Humphrey in the slot as a bigger slot now in terms of defending the run? And then when you do that, if you're like, we can't really run out of 12 personnel and we're having a hard time passing out of it because instead of drafting a third receiver in the second round, we drafted a blocking only tight end who's 260 and can't move. And now our passing game is worse. Okay, now all right. Now let's go find like kind of like Kenyon Sadiq.
Yeah.
Let's go find these smaller, faster tight ends, but they will at least block. They will block. So then we'll
Right.
just get back to what a wide tight end was 15 years ago, where it
Right.
was like they're 6'3", they're 245, they block, but then they also run routes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Bringing back
then
like the Brent Sellecks and the those kind of guys where which is funny that we're gonna get back to that point I think
that's
as
all
well.
this is, man. It's all cyclical. It's what they and it's funny because now we've been doing this part of it long enough that we're like actually going to live in a cycle.
Yeah.
Um, And then the other thing was, oh, and the other reason I think it's going to go away is I kind of just alluded to it, but like the blocking tight end's supposed to be great when you get him in the sixth round. It's like,
Correct.
oh, and in the sixth round, we got the 6'6", 260 pound guy who was an offensive line. He came in as a freshman to college as an offensive lineman, didn't quite make it, so they converted him to tight end. And like, boom. And now, like, we don't ask him to do anything with skills, and we just like let him stand on the end and block some guys. And now that the value has swung to now we got to get that same guy in the second round because he's like 10% more athletic than he was 5 years ago. Now we're going to see a deficit in talent in other parts of the roster. And then I think people are going to swing back and be like, oh, okay, maybe we got a little too excited with the Tip Raymonds and the Roushes and Borkachers and
Right.
whatever. So,
Yeah, like Roush I don't even mind because it was kind of a round where he was maybe valued. Like maybe
hmm
he was maybe not a top 100 player for some people,
hmm
but Klein and like even and I mean I'm just a guy who's on his couch, but like even on my big board, like I ended up going to 150. I think I had Klein as like 140 something,
mm
and so like even for me, and Borkircher wasn't even there for me, and so um, Klein, even though I like some of the stuff that he has going for him as a project, I'm just not taking that in the second round. Like, sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
especially for when you look at both the teams that did it as these kind of like fringe contenders that are
Hmm.
both in the same division competing, like, for a chance to maybe make a playoff run. Like, there's clear other needs that both these teams had that you can address, whether it was, maybe getting another offensive lineman for the Texans, and then even I would say, I don't even know if I would go running back for the Jags, but like maybe there's a linebacker do you like there to just
Yes.
get more depth, and
Hmm.
instead of saying like, oh, we'll just take Jalen Husky and it'll be all right. Anyways, but I it was just something that I know that was a big talking point for the NFL world, and I think I just wanted to talk to you about it and make sure I wasn't kind of crazy and thinking that this is probably not going to be something that we see every year going forward for the next 5 seasons. Like, it might be over after next year.